In 1968, the quiet streets of Scotswood, Newcastle, were shattered by the discovery of two young boys, Martin Brown and Brian Howe, found dead under mysterious circumstances. Who's the culprit? What's behind these murders? That's what we'll discover in this episode. Welcome to my channel, where I share with you stories, cases, and all that is mysterious and exotic. So, get yourselves comfortable, and let's get started. Martin Brown was a lively and curious 4-year-old boy living in the Scotswood area of Newcastle upon Tyne. On May 25, 1968, Martin was found lifeless in an abandoned house, a place where local children often played. His sudden and tragic death shocked the community, as there were no obvious signs of violence, leading many to believe it was a tragic accident. Martin was known for his playful nature and his love for exploring the neighborhood. Just as the neighborhood begins to recover, tragedy strikes again. 2 months later, in the heat of July, Brian Howe was a 3-year-old boy living in the same Scotswood neighborhood. On July 31, 1968, Brian was found lifeless on a stretch of wasteland near his home. His small body bore signs of strangulation and, disturbingly, mutilation, details that sent shockwaves through the community. He was a cheerful, innocent child who loved playing outside with other children. The local police are perplexed. Who would perpetrate such atrocious acts against defenseless children? The community is tense, with parents keeping their children close and casting wary glances at their neighbors. As the investigation progresses, detectives diligently work to assemble the pieces of this troubling mystery. Upon closer examination, the pathologist noticed slight pressure marks on Martin's neck, indicating possible strangulation, but they lacked conclusive evidence to determine foul play at this stage. As for Brian Howe, Brian's body bore post-mortem injuries, including marks made with a pair of scissors. The perpetrator had scratched his legs and buttocks and even clumsily carved the letter M into his abdomen, details not publicly known. During initial inquiries, the detectives noticed the unusual behavior of two young girls. Both girls had a morbid fascination with the investigation and crime scenes. They were seen hanging around the area where Martin Brown was found and even attended his funeral. Their presence and peculiar interest raised red flags for the investigators. Who are these two girls and why did they attract the investigators' attention? Mary Bell and Norma Bell. Neighbors and other children reported observing Mary and Norma interacting with the victims shortly before their bodies were discovered. Witnesses saw the girls playing with Brian on the day he died, further implicating them in the tragedy. Both girls displayed an unsettling interest in the investigation. They frequently visited the locations where the boys were found, often watching the police work from a close distance. Also, Mary and Norma were seen at Martin's funeral, watching the proceedings with interest, which struck many as odd for children of their age. Made unsettling comments, bragging to other children. Mary was known to make disturbing boasts to other children about having harmed the boys. Some written notes were especially incriminating. A few days after Martin's death, Mary and Norma broke into a nursery school and left behind notes admitting to the crime and making further threats. The police initially dismissed these as a childish prank. Furthermore, Mary drew pictures of the crime scenes and described the incidents in a manner that only someone with first-hand knowledge could. Her depictions included details, such as the use of scissors in the mutilation of Brian Howe, that had not been publicly released. The police first noticed Mary and Norma's unusual behavior around the crime scenes and their morbid fascination with the investigation. This raised initial suspicions. Alongside with witnesses reported seeing the girls with the victims shortly before their deaths. As a result, the two girls were the subject of police questioning. The police conducted separate interrogations for Mary and Norma to prevent them from coordinating their stories. This tactic helped reveal inconsistencies in their accounts. During questioning, both girls provided conflicting and contradictory statements about their whereabouts and actions on the days of the murders. Norma Bell initially claimed she saw nothing unusual but later changed her story, providing differing accounts of what happened on the days of the murders. Mary Bell gave detailed, albeit evolving narratives that indicated she knew more about the incidents than she initially let on. These inconsistencies raised further suspicion. The police built a rapport with the girls, making them feel comfortable enough to talk. This approach helped the girls open up and share more information. The police confronted Mary and Norma with evidence, such as witness statements and forensic findings, to pressure them into confessing. They used the girls' own words and actions against them. Although Norma initially denied involvement, she eventually corroborated some of Mary's statements, further implicating Mary. Norma's changing story and eventual admission of certain details helped build the case against Mary. The evidence and investigation ultimately pointed to Mary Bell as the primary perpetrator. Her unusual behavior, inconsistent statements, and detailed knowledge of the crimes, combined with forensic evidence and witness testimonies, along with another incriminating piece of evidence against Mary. Forensic analysis revealed fibers from Mary's clothing on Brian's body, placing her at the crime scene. This physical evidence was instrumental in linking her to Brian's death. And let us not forget the letter M carved into Brian Howe's abdomen, details not publicly known but later described by Mary Bell. But who is this Mary Bell and why did she commit such crimes? Mary Flora Bell was born on May 26, 1957, in Newcastle upon Tyne, England. Her early life was marked by severe neglect and abuse. Her mother, Betty McCricket, was a well-known local prostitute who was often absent from the family home, frequently traveling to Glasgow for work. Betty was only 17 years old when she gave birth to Mary, and the identity of Mary's biological father remains uncertain. For most of her life, Mary believed her father to be William Billy Bell, a violent alcoholic and habitual criminal with an arrest record for crimes including armed robbery. Mary was an unwanted and neglected child. According to her aunt, Isa McCricket, within minutes of Mary's birth, her mother had resented hospital staff attempting to place her daughter in her arms, shouting, "Take the thing away from me." As a baby, toddler, and young child, Mary frequently suffered injuries in household accidents while alone with her mother, leading her family to believe that either her mother was deliberately negligent or intentionally attempting to harm or kill her daughter. On one occasion, Betty dropped Mary from a first-floor window. On another, she plied her daughter with sleeping pills. Mary's early years were also marred by sexual abuse. At the tender age of 4 or 5, she was subjected to sexual assaults by her mother's clients. This traumatic upbringing had a profound impact on Mary's psychological development, contributing to her later violent behavior. Mary grew up in the poorer Scotswood area of Newcastle, exposed to a harsh environment rife with domestic violence and criminal behavior. This normalized her acts of aggression towards other children, as well as vandalism and theft. Despite these alarming behaviors, they were often dismissed as attention-seeking, making it easier for her to continue without intervention. Mary Bell's first crime occurred on May 25, 1968, just a day before her 11th birthday. She lured 4-year-old Martin Brown to an abandoned house in Scotswood, Newcastle. The initial investigation did not immediately identify her as the perpetrator. The death was initially considered an accident due to the lack of obvious signs of violence. On July 31, 1968, Mary committed her second murder, this time with Norma's involvement. They lured 3-year-old Brian Howe to a wasteland, where Mary strangled him and mutilated his body with scissors. The police investigation into Brian's death was more thorough, and the suspicious behavior of Mary and Norma led to their arrest on August 7, 1968. During the interrogation, Mary eventually confessed to both murders, providing chilling details about how she strangled the boys and mutilated Brian's body. Her confession was crucial in securing her conviction. Mary was charged with 2 counts of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility, as it was determined that she had a psychopathic personality disorder. She was sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, a form of indefinite imprisonment. Mary Bell was detained at Red Bank Secure Unit in Newton-le-Willows, Merseyside. She stayed there from February 1969 until November 1973. Mary Bell was released from Red Bank Secure Unit in November 1973. At that time, she was 16 years old. Red Bank was a secure children's home and housed not only boys but later specialized in accommodating child sex offenders. Mary later claimed that she was sexually abused by a member of staff and several inmates while she was there. After being released from the Red Bank Secure Unit at the age of 16, Mary Bell's life continued through a series of detentions at different institutions. Mary Bell remained under continuous detention until her ultimate release. After leaving Red Bank, she was held at Stile Orphanage, a short-term holding place for young offenders. and Blunderston Prison. Here she completed her remaining sentence under a more secure and stricter environment. In 1980, at the age of 23, Mary Bell was finally released from detention. Her release was under strict anonymity orders to protect her identity and allow her to reintegrate into society without the stigma of her past. Due to the high-profile nature of her crimes, Mary continually lived under different pseudonyms. Her new identity was designed to ensure her safety and give her an opportunity for a fresh start. She was forced to move frequently and change her name several times over the years to maintain her privacy. Mary managed to find some semblance of normalcy. She had a daughter in 1984, who was also granted anonymity. This anonymity was later extended to include her granddaughter, ensuring that both could live their lives without the burdens of public scrutiny. Despite her efforts to maintain a low profile, public interest in Mary Bell's story remained high. Any breach of her anonymity orders could result in legal action. She faced persistent challenges and had to make conscious efforts to remain out of sight, working various low-profile jobs. Mary's case continued to spark debates and interest over the years. Her story has been covered in books and documentaries, critically examining the effects of her abusive childhood, the legal frameworks for dealing with juvenile offenders, and the concept of redemption. Living under a new identity, Mary Bell, now in her 60s, leads a reclusive and private life. She remains out of the public eye, focusing on protecting herself and her family from the echoes of her past. Who would have expected this from such a young girl? I would like to know what you think about this matter. If you have any interesting stories you would like to hear, let me know in the comments.